Are we teaching at a high enough level that I would be comfortable sending my son to the school?
Hi, my name is Pranav Kothari. In my job, I get to work with government school systems in the field of assessments and personalized learning. I'm really excited to have Kruti Bharucha here, who I'll be conversing with today. She's the CEO of Peepul and formerly worked for Absolute Return for Kids in India. I was very curious to speak to Kruti because she had worked in the corporate sector for 19 years and then made the switch. She's been at it for the last 5 years, has started a school which had only 9 children and took it up all the way to 830 children across 3 schools. I found that story incredible, and I wanted to understand what was the secret sauce of that. I want to understand why did she choose to work with the government? What is the standard? What is the benchmark that she sets for herself and for the children in her school? And I want to understand as to what does scale mean to her. Thank you, Kruti, for joining the show, and I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks, Pranav.
So, Kruti, what's at the heart of the Peepul School?
So I think a strong focus on processes, on management, coaching, professional development. The child is really at the heart of what we do, right? Making sure that it's not just raising the average, but really helping every child reach his or her potential. And so that's very close to us. And I think the approaches become very different, or the approach becomes very different when you think of every single child and not just raising the average.
Right.
So that translates into the lesson plans and the structures and learning objectives that we create, the way in which we train our teachers, how we differentiate within the classroom, how we assess our children, and then how we provide additional support to kids that may be struggling or may need a little additional support.
And why are you making so many investments in these processes? Why are you documenting all of this? I mean, what's the big goal after doing this?
Yeah, so I think we've actually spent a lot of time codifying and documenting, right?
Yeah.
Because in our first year, since we opened our first school, the first year was a lot of learning, right? How do you adapt the model? How do you contextualize it? How do you figure out what the school system in Delhi needs and then be able to close those gaps? And the answer is different in every state, right? I mean, teachers are different, right. The student demographic is different, urban versus rural is different.
Right.
So the first year was really a year of learning, contextualizing, and now we've really, I think we've kind of stabilized our operations. We have a good handle on what we think a Peepul school should look like. And so if you go to any one of our schools, you'll have a similar look and feel, not just outside, but actually within the classroom, which is most important to us.
Right.
And a reason, and when we kind of went in with that specific objective, we actually codified a lot of processes and operations. So how do we recruit teachers? How do we assess our students? How do we do community engagement? Because we felt it was really important for us to codify what we think works and what doesn't work, to be able to then help others run schools that may be similar to ours,
right.
Or at least even if it's not the same as a Peepul school,
yeah.
To really be able to learn from what has worked and what hasn't worked for us,
right. So
and we want to learn from others too, right?
Yes. You mentioned teacher professional development. I know you've done tens of thousands of government school students in one state of India. What were some insights from that? What did you learn? I mean, at that scale, doing teacher professional development, I'm just very curious how that went and what came out of it.
So we used a cascaded model of training, which is what many organizations use, but we had kind of district resource groups, state resource groups, and I think our point of leverage was really working at the district and block level.
Okay.
And and not just having a top-down approach, but really working very closely with head teachers and teachers to help them understand what we wanted to collaboratively make happen, understand their motivation, and then make enough time and space for them to be able to execute that change. And then really not come across as, doing inspections or, any kind of penalties associated with the individual not taking that action, but really providing a supportive environment, right? So I think it was making opportunities available for at the school level for teachers and head teachers and then cluster academic coordinators to see our team as a resource. And then being able to follow up and monitor at the block and cluster level was really important, and for us to be able to track that. So we had a very small team that actually conducted trainings for thousands of individuals, and we had the support of the government though, and so it was easier to kind of push things through. But I think we went in with a very collaborative, open approach, and really with the intent of translating change and making change happen at the schools.
Right. Speaking of collaboration with the government, I mean, you have chosen that path as opposed to working with the private schools where there's a lot more agility, or sometimes decision making is faster. So why did you choose to work with the government?
I think it's the scale at which the government influences education systems, right? I mean, there is the scale and then kind of the quality problem, right? So the government has to a large extent solved the enrollment problem, right? And I think that's tremendous progress that's been made over the last couple of decades.
Given the size of India, I mean, that's fantastic.
Exactly. And so the systems are in place, right? To be able to actually now focus on quality as opposed to enrollment. And so one of the things that's very attractive is just the scale, right, of being able to actually impact thousands and tens of thousands of children. But also just making sure that the government also integrates this whole idea of quality and being able to then showcase and demonstrate it in one geography to be able to then take it and replicate it in a sustainable manner to other geographies. And I think when you embed within the government, you're able to then showcase best practice and take it to other states. Whereas if you do it in a private school setting or a low-cost private school setting or with affordable private schools, you're kind of localizing yourself, and it's much harder to then take it translated at either the national level or to other states.
Right. And again, a lot of the systems and processes and documentation that you're doing would allow for this to be done faster, and more governments will be taken, because they'll be able to see that there's a blueprint that exists, it's validated in some settings in government school systems, and they can probably adopt it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great point, which is our theory of change is being able to demonstrate and raise the bar and have higher expectations of schools and of the system, right? So it's not just setting up schools, it's not just doing teacher training. Those are the programs through which we want to demonstrate and demonstrate what's possible in a replicable and sustainable manner. But ultimately we want to have systemic impact, right? We want these best practices to feed into the way that the government does teacher training, for example, right? They already have a pre-service and an in-service training program that they use for all of their, hundreds and thousands of teachers. So we want that to be, we want our work to be a catalyst for that kind of systemic change. We want our work around schools to be able to be a catalyst for, small changes and also larger disruptive changes that the government can make around curriculum, around classroom teaching, around behavior management. There is so much that happens at a school which you can document, codify, and then think about replicating at a systemic level.
But has the government been engaging with you? Have they visited? Have they been curious and asking you on how they can do all of those things? Absolutely.
So we've had a lot of support from various governments and stakeholders. Anil Swarup who was Secretary MHRD, had visited about 6 months ago when he was still in that position. We've had many other visitors to the schools.
That must have been just tell me that morning, as you got up today, the Secretary of School Education is coming to your school. Just paint me a picture of that morning.
I think we didn't do anything differently, quite honestly, and we didn't really prepare for that visit. And we don't really prepare for any visit. What we want to show is what's happening without the fancy stuff around it, right?
Yeah.
We want people to really understand that the classroom is where change is happening.
Right.
And therefore, I feel that if you prepare for a visit, you're to some extent falsifying what's really happening. We went from an enrollment of 9 in our first year to 420 by the end of our second year.
9 to 420 in
Yeah.
2 years.
In
That's
2 years.
incredible. That's
And
50 times.
And some of the metrics, I think, we were able to have attendance at 80%, parent-teacher meeting attendance at 95%,
Impressive.
retention rates of 93%, 80% of our students either meeting or exceeding expectations. So there's a very, some of those metrics are great, but there's also a really powerful feeling when you're able to actually see something. And I think that's the power of being able to demonstrate. It's not just getting into an office and talking about what should happen, right? I mean, this is the change that we want to happen, to make happen. And so bringing somebody to actually see that is very powerful. And then I think it's a small community, as you know, in the education sector. We've received a lot of kind of media coverage around the schools and some of the work that we're doing. So folks have reached out to us.
Kruti, I'm sure like every funder, people asking you, scale. Like, what is scale to you? What are your plans to scale? How do you view some of this stuff?
Yeah, it's a critical question, and one that we are struggling with at the moment. There's this trade-off between quality and scale, right? And many programs that have run in the education space, they've been great pilots and they've been pioneering, but the minute you think about scale, quality can dip, right? Because you just can't pay as much attention. And that's especially true when it comes to running whole schools or doing teacher training. So the big question that we are facing at the moment is how can we scale and what's the right number to scale to while maintaining the same quality bar. So in terms of scale, we've had interest from various state governments. Officials have come and visited the school, seen what's possible and said, how do we replicate this in our school systems? So one of the things we're really trying to figure out is what is that number, right? Other school networks in India are working with a number of, between 10 to 30 schools in terms of their scale play. We want to be ambitious, right? We want to work across multiple state governments when there's strong government commitment. So right now, what's critical for us is figuring out what's the model for scale. We don't want to just take what we have right now and then replicate that across multiple schools. I think what's important and what we realize is that you have to plan for scale from the very beginning. Right? So if we are thinking about scale, and again, don't know what that number is, whether it's 20, 50, 100, the model has to be very clear from the outset, and there needs to be a plan over a 3 to 5 year period for scaling. But that has to be done at the outset, rather than doing a pilot in a particular state and then saying, okay, now we're going to replicate this in 100 schools. And some of the scale also happens, there's some amount of work that we'll do directly ourselves, and we will always do that, but some of the scale will happen through partnerships and support and advice that we can give others around what has worked and what has not worked in our programs. Right? So it's not just that we have to do everything ourselves. I think we can often work with the government to advise them, or work with other organizations and partners to help them take some of our practices. I think also it's important to keep in mind that we're working very closely with the government and integrating very much with them. So it's not necessarily just scaling, like you said, to hit a certain number, and often the government counterparts will say, well, let's figure out that number. Fair enough. So you always want to have a goal and a vision to work with. But a lot of what we will also do is to build the capacity of the system. Right? So building the capacity of government teachers, putting reforms or measures in place that will contribute to systemic impact. And so a lot of that is also part of our scale play. So while we may not necessarily have thousands of schools, I think to the extent that we can get involved in some of these things that will have broader systemic impact, that's also scale.
Yes.
What's important for us is to really measure what good looks like and measure the impact of that work.
Yes.
So we don't want to just train, hundreds of teachers without actually understanding whether they are changing classroom practice.
Yes.
Right. Also, we may suggest a couple of changes around classroom practice, but is that what's really going to shift the needle, right? Or turn the dial or whatever you want to use, right? But is that really what's going to translate into better learning outcomes for children?
Yeah.
So I think there's the first step of identifying whether the change we're recommending or the improvements we're recommending are the right ones, and then measuring the impact of that once there's a program in place.
Yeah, very powerful. So always constantly calibrate what you're doing. Is that making an impact? Is it translating into teacher capabilities and ultimately student learning outcomes before sort of scaling up something? Great. Kruti, when we last met, you were talking about forming your board, and I know you came at it with such a high degree of thinking. Like, you were very thoughtful about, what board members you wanted. Would love to understand this, like, what were the factors, what were you looking for in a board, why is a board important to you, how did you go about searching and forming this?
You're very kind, saying all those nice things. I had a lot of help, I actually I had never done this before, right? And so I was really trying to understand how to constitute a board and what should a board, what should board members, how to kind of leverage board members to help us do what we want to do, right? And I think it's very important to have, board members that bring specific skills to the table that we need to be able to build ourselves as a strong organization for the future.
Okay.
So every board member that we have at the moment has something very unique and a certain set of experiences or a certain career that is exactly what we need in terms of helping us brainstorm and think through what our growth path is going to be. But what is magical about our board meetings and amazing to see is that each individual is terrific and extremely accomplished, but they're also very humble. They're extremely collaborative. And so the board culture is just a very warm, supportive board culture. And that's not to say that it should always be like that, right? Because you also need the board to be able to pressure test and really ask tough questions. But yeah, the first couple of meetings have just been helping us really think about what's right for the organization, right? And so no personal agendas, and I think that's one of the things that we kept in mind as we were thinking about who's right for our board. It's not just their set of accomplishments, but it's really who they are as a person, and whether together they would gel well. Right? It's not about just the individual, but it's about everyone being able to work together.
So, Kruti, was there like one particular instance that you remember that sort of helped you transition? Was there someone or something that really prompted this shift?
Yeah, so I'd been wanting to do it for a while, and I think kind of my passion was really to be in the development sector, and I knew that longer term that's where I saw myself, and specifically in education. But the turning point, I mean, there were two things. My son was born in 2009, and so there was, of course, seeing how he was growing and the experiences that he was receiving, the schools he was going to, and the role that teachers had to play in his development. And then in 2013, I was in my previous organization in the corporate sector. The turning point was I was just being promoted to managing director, and so that was a fairly significant turning point because I had to kind of decide where I saw myself long term. And at that point, I said, well, if I really want to make the switch, I should do it at that point rather than 10 years later. Yeah, and I think it surprised a lot of people at that time because they, I mean, including my mom, who thought, I
Beti gayi haath se.
So, but I think I knew I was very clear that this is what I wanted to do, and I felt that if I kept delaying it. I needed to do it when I was at the peak of my career rather than wait for another 15, 20 years. And so the one question I got commonly asked was, well, why are you thinking about doing it now? I mean, join the nonprofit sector when you're 50 and you've got kind of a financial kitty that you are secure about. But I think for me, I said, well, who knows what's going to happen in 15 years, right? So if I want to do it, I better do it now.
So in 2014, there were a lot of firsts, right? It was your first job in India. It was the first job in the development sector. It was the first job where you were a startup CEO. I mean, that's intimidating. Like, how did you feel back then?
I remember going to, I think my first workshop or conference was, I was surrounded by people who had been in the space for a while and also people who were regarded as extremely influential in the space. And the conversation was about the Right to Education Act.
Okay.
So I remember before that workshop, I read up the Right to Education Act, which most people
You seem like a good student. You do your homework before the class next day.
But I think that what I had that year was I was just fearless, right? I asked a lot of questions. And I felt that because I was new to the space, I just had an opportunity to learn. And I felt that because I was new, I could just be a little more fearless and really question a lot of what was happening, whether it was happening the right way, and use it as a learning opportunity as well as an opportunity to just understand what other folks were doing.
Is there really excitement in this sector? Are there interesting and important problems to solve? I mean, should we do this, after we've had successful careers in banking and finance, like the two of us had?
Yeah.
Is this really a job worth starting right out of college?
I think I think every young person will have to, every person will be different and every person will have a different purpose in life and will want different things from life. And so I think first it's understanding yourself and what you see as your career path. I think there's no right time to enter the sector, right? I mean, I think if you're very passionate about it and you see this as the place to be, there are so many opportunities, right? There is so much exciting stuff that's happening, as you know. But I think it really depends on every individual and what type of life experiences they want to have. So some folks may want to try out the corporate sector for a while, like you and I had done, right? And help, and use that experience to build skills that they can bring back to the development sector or to education. I think that's the path that I took. And I honestly feel like the 19 years in, multilaterals, in consulting firms, in the finance space, all of those skills are skills that have prepared me for the role I'm playing right now. So I don't think there's a right time. I think it really depends on the person, but regardless of when the individual joins, there is just so much to do. I think there's no bigger problem to solve than improving the quality of education for all kids in India.
So it's been 5 years, and counting.
I know it's gone by like this, huh?
What is some memorable moments that you've had in this journey?
I think what's really special for me is just spending time at the schools. There's nothing like the energy that you see when you just see all of the kids learning. And
so it's pure.
It really is, and you see children actually learning and developing, and that's just really special. I think there are times when, when we started in 2015 in our kind of flagship school, I knew the name of every single child, almost, right?
Super.
And so now I've seen, the kids that joined us in grade 1 at that time have now gone to grade 4, which is kind of similar to my own son, right? And so I feel like they're my children, right? It's like I have all these kids and I just see how, the last time every time I spend time with the grade 4 kids, it's special because I see how much they've grown and developed and learned.
Yes.
And so, I remember in grade 1, they were working on like fine motor skills. Some of them didn't even sit in the class. So we had to like settle them in and spend so much time. And now they're doing, detailed worksheets, writing, reading fairly, advanced text, speaking fluent English. It's just amazing. And I just, sometimes Siddharth has also, like, over the summer gone and attended the school when, he had summer holidays and the school had started.
Sure.
And so it's just nice to see, in some instances, they're actually, a level or so ahead of what he's learning, for example, in maths.
Your own son?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So it's really nice, right? Because, you feel like you're making, you're doing something, or, you're really contributing to the process of developing every child.
I'm so amazed that you're using your son's intelligence, his education levels as the barometer, as like almost like a minimum threshold of what you want your 430 kids in your school to learn. That's very inspiring.
No, so we have now 800 kids across 3 schools, but that's the litmus test for me, right? Are we teaching at a high enough level that I would be comfortable sending my son to the school? I think that's always,
powerful.
That's the litmus test that all of us work with. And so we have the same standards, we have the same expectations. Infrastructure may be different. Private school infrastructure is better, you've got more extracurricular activities, there's more parental, support at home because the parents are probably better educated. But in the school, it should be a similar experience, and the teachers should be as competent as in my son's school.
That's really inspiring to hear. It was so great, Kruti. I really enjoyed our conversation. I loved the fact on how to maintain neutrality. I was especially touched by the standard you set for your children, with your son sort of being the benchmark. It's just amazing to see you persist, despite having a family, having the board to report to, the fundraising to do, the team under you, constantly keeping them inspired, working with the government, and so it's just, and every time I see you, it's almost like, you're the freshest, you're like the most energetic person. So, I'll almost come to you sometimes, so let me get my dose of energy, right? Let me go talk to Kruti, and I'll do it. It was really, really remarkable to have you, and I very much enjoyed this.
Thank you, Pranav. And I think it's folks like you and folks like you in the sector that just make it really energizing and fun to work in the sector. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.